Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So, thank you guys so much for joining us on one of the warmest days of the year. And so, for those that don't know, I'm Lakeisha Hull. I'm the Prince George's County Planning Director. And so, you're going to be hanging out with some really cool folks for the next hour as we talk more about CB15. And so today's brown bag section in number 7. I found out from my team that we're on number 7. We have 3 more sessions left before we wrap up this first round of series. So thank you guys for joining us. We do have some wonderful folks that's joining us here at Largo headquarters. If you're in the area, please make sure to swing by. Our doors are open, and so you can also join us online. We have about 30, almost 40 folks online, so thank you so much for joining us. So without further ado, I know you guys are very excited about this topic. It's a very important topic as well. And so we have some great presenters today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to do an icebreaker, and then we're going to go into the presentation.
Hi there. I'm going to start off today with a quick recap of the last session that was on Transportation Review Guidelines. Crystal Hancock, Supervisor of Transportation Planning Section, gave a great presentation. Those who attended received a copy and a link to the recording. If you're interested in receiving a copy, please ask at the end of the session. If you're virtual, please drop your request in the chat. We will be sending an email to those attending today with slides and a link to the recorded presentation after today's session. Ms. Hancock presented last month on Transportation Review Guidelines, the review for adequacy of transportation facilities through the level of service standards, traffic analysis, and project scoping. Also discussed were methods of evaluation for pedestrian bikeway adequacy, including bicycle and pedestrian impact statements. She also discussed Go Prince George's Transportation Master Plan, and the preliminary plan can now be found on our website for your review and comments. We'll be starting off today's session with 2 icebreakers. Okay, so the first one is name a TOD in Prince George's County, and that's a transit-oriented development in Prince George's County. So if you see a name up there you already recognize, you can just click on it and add a vote to it. And if you can't do the icebreaker here, you can put your answer in the chat. Okay, so far we have Capitol Heights and Largo. Okay, now it looks like Greenbelt's winning. All right. All right, we're going to shut down the chat in a couple seconds. Okay, Lisa? Okay, we have a second question. The second question is, here we go. Do you agree with the updated sign posting requirements? Yes or no? I know you guys all have an opinion out there. Okay, so right now we're at what, 75% say yes. Okay then, can you shut down? Okay, so today's session focuses on CB15 and transitional provisions. Next month, April 8th, the topic will be subdivision applications, new ordinances, staff review, and analysis. And I would like to recommend and remind you that registration opens at the end of today's session and closes 1 week in advance of the date of the next session. So you must register by Tuesday, April 1st. And with that, I'd like to introduce James Hunt, Deputy Planning Director.
All right, thank you, Marion, and good afternoon, everyone. This is, of course, my first time doing an actual session here. I've always participated and kind of been in the background, but I really want to thank everyone for joining us here today because on this very important topic. To kind of start everything off, we can go on to the next slide. When it comes to the transitional provisions in CB15, as most of you are aware, this was a very, very, very hot topic as of last year and probably even the year before, right after, the new zoning ordinance was adopted back in 2022. And implemented back in 2022. So there was a lot of work that took place with a lot of folks when it comes to the development community, our citizens, staff, the county council members, everyone, a lot of engagement when it came to this process. And to kind of start everything off, even before then, we had our general plan that was adopted back in 2014, and that set the stage for development all over Prince George's County. So before you even get into a zoning ordinance, you got to have a plan of how you want to develop your locality. So that said, Prince George's County adopted their Plan 2035, which set the stage not only when it comes to development, it included in all these different other parameters in there talking about transportation, public facilities that are in there as well. So all these different things are associated, environmental planning, everything when it comes to planning is all incorporated in our Plan 2035, which is our general plan. Next slide. In the brand new zoning ordinance that we have, there are some highlighted areas we want to kind of dig into a little bit. One of them is, it determines what can and cannot be developed. So that's what the zoning ordinance is going to do anyway. That's the intent of it and how we're going to develop, as well as the whole framework of development. Also talks about different uses that are allowed in various locations and how they mix in with other uses in that immediate area. And also, as you all know, we'll all kind of dig into and talk about the density, location, and intensity standards that are out there as well. And so that's what the new zoning ordinance was intended to do. We had a whole analysis took place with that, not only with the Clarion Company, which is our consultant that came in and worked with us on that initiative, however, also with staff, with our county council members, with the citizens, and the development community. Go to the next slide. So with the zoning ordinance, I want to kind of take a moment before we kind of go in with CB15 and to kind of highlight the planning department's different zoning tools that are made available to you all as a part of the process, because as you all are on the development side, on the citizen side, are looking at development all over Prince George's County, know that the planning department has a huge amount of tools that are made readily available to you 24 hours a day, obviously. So we have, obviously, within that, we have our Go Prince George's draft plan that's out there. That's tied into the zoning ordinance, obviously. That's out there right now. We have a master plan from 2009 that recently was, you have a draft plan that kind of is looking to update that master plan of transportation. In addition to that, we also had different studies that are made available to you all on our data. So our research section that we have dedicated to looking at different planning initiatives that takes into account takes into account the demographics of Prince George's County, looking at, townhouse development that's out there, other residential developments that are out there, commercial development. Some of our colleagues are really concerned about shopping centers all over Prince George's County. There was a study done on shopping center development all over Prince George's County. And one of our number one tools that we have is obviously PG Atlas. It does a lot when you want to be, kind of get more information about development in the county, where it's taking place, what applicable plans are out there associated with each one of the properties. Also talking about the adjacent uses that are out there as well. One of the most recent updates that I was able to mention and kind of brief the Maryland Building Industry Association on not too long ago was the fact that we now have a connection with the Momentum program with DPI. So you can actually log in to our PG Atlas program and look at permitting data that's out there as well. So all these things are kind of intertwined in there to talk about development all over Prince George's County. And you can use this as a tool when it comes to looking at various things on your day-to-day basis. Next slide. So kind of going into our highlights today when it comes to the new zoning ordinance, we have a lot. CB15 was, if you all have printed out or seen the document, it's about, I'd say about an inch thick, if not more than that, right? Definitely that much. But it goes into a lot of detail on making some changes because we realize when it comes to the zoning ordinance, we have a draft, the zoning ordinance goes out there, gets adopted. And then as you are looking at the zoning ordinance and implementing the different requirements and regulations in there, there are opportunities to make improvements there. So you really don't know a lot of things until actually the rubber meets the road. And so that's what, Prince George's County was experiencing, was the new regulations associated with that and the development that's taking place. So the county council and the county in general just felt like they needed to update those regulations that are out there to accommodate the development that's going on. So within the zoning ordinance, we have multiple different areas and provisions that are being looked at. So we have 27 points. I won't have to go through this, but you can see on the screen, there are quite a few of them out there, different sections that we really looked at. And it was a lot of sections in there to go through and changes that were taking place in there as well. So as a part of that process, and I'll go into that in just a moment, but the county council is sitting as the district council. It's their authority to look at the zoning ordinance and the regulations and to adopt it, okay? So the planning department and the planning board can make recommendations to the county council. It's all within the county council's authority to make those different changes that are out there. In addition to that, the county council also will direct the planning department to conduct any studies that are out there, any reviews, and report that back to them. One of the things that we have, of course, we have these different studies. They have the master plan of transportation. That's one of the things we were looking into doing. There are other things out there that the county council are looking at directing as well, such as the missing middle housing. So we're looking at that and other areas as well. So these are some of the opportunities that we have made available to us. Next. The zoning ordinance, or the new CB15 regulations that are out there, built on the improvements made from the county zoning ordinance that was adopted back in 2022. Furthermore, this zoning rewrite that took place and was implemented was done after 50 years. Typically within the planning industry or the community, we look at updating a zoning ordinance, let's say probably about every, 15 years, I'd say, if not. But now we went all the way from 50 years to update the zoning ordinance. It was a lot, I would say a Herculean effort to get this done because you have so many stakeholders that are out there, and the county council and the planning board and the citizens, everybody wanted to make sure we got this right this time. So that said, we are always looking at ways to improve the zoning ordinance. And so this is one of the ways CB15 was an avenue to continuously make improvements and to look at these different things that are out there associated with that. Also, the zoning ordinance is a vehicle to implement the Plan 2035 general plan that's out there as well, and to refine the different areas of the zoning ordinance. Next slide. So as you can see on this slide, we really dug into the differences and the purpose of CB15, which was, as you can see, for the purpose of reconciling certain terms, procedures, and other language of the new zoning ordinance, revising certain procedures and regulations, and adding clarification language to further effectuate successful implementation of the county's new, modern, streamlined zoning ordinance. Okay, that is the intent and the purpose of CB15, and that's the reason why it took a lot of coordination to take place to occur in order to ensure this was happening here. This is not an easy task. Next slide. So the process when it comes to implementing such a significant piece of legislation here within Prince George's County starts off with a planning board hearing and a recommendation. In addition to that, it goes into council presentation, committee meetings that take place, then the introduction by the county council or the district council, and then goes into public hearing and adoption after that with the county council as a part of that process. Next slide. To start off, I do want to go into the transitional provisions. When it comes to the transitional provisions, this is a very, very hot topic, a very important topic for all of us. Why? Because we wanted to give an opportunity for the development community to be able to transition into this new zoning ordinance, understanding that certain development that was already occurring, we didn't want to kind of impact or be a hurdle to that development. Therefore, it gave an opportunity for the development community to kind of continue on. If they already started down that road or that process, they're able to continue on with that development, understanding those requirements before may be different from the new zoning ordinance. So that's the reason why the county council felt the need to kind of have that transitional provision out there for those developments in there as well. Next slide. I will say this before I go into this. There, under that particular section of the general provisions that are out there, some of the things that were brought up were primarily, and a lot of this throughout as we have these conversations, a lot of these were administrative corrections that did take place with the CB15. So I want to clarify here, there were a lot of significant administrative changes in there to kind of get things on the right set manner. Under that, we're talking about consistency with the land use article under the transitional provisions in there. In addition to that, they were looking at the conveyance of land when it comes to both the state of Maryland, the federal government, as well as with the University of Maryland. Make that clarification in there as well. Next slide. So before we go on, I do want to make sure that this session is very interactive, right? So that said, and speaking about and talking about the transitional provisions, before we go a little bit further in there, before we talk about the transitional provisions, I want to ask if there are any questions related to that, because we have our general counsel here, our principal counsel, I should say, who would be able to kind of help guide through those different questions through this process. So I want to stop and give an opportunity for the folks here in the room, as well as the folks online, to see if they have any questions when it comes to those transitional provisions. And David, if you want to come on up, just I'm sorry, Director Holbert, apologize. I want to recognize David Warner, who's our principal counsel, too, to kind of come on up as we ask our questions, too.
So it's me, the director, again. So my question's a hypothetical question almost. So what exactly does it mean by transitional provisions? So we might have some people that don't understand what that means. So if we can explain that a little bit, that would be helpful.
Great question, Planning Director Hall. Thank you. David Warner, Principal Counsel. The idea behind the transitional provisions was, as James mentioned, to allow this period of time when applicants could continue to obtain the approvals they need to develop projects following the procedures in the old ordinance and the old requirements of the prior zoning and subdivision laws. It was only going to be applicable to those projects that were in the pipeline. So if you have a development approval that's still active that you received under the prior zoning or subdivision laws, you can use that approval to proceed to continue finishing your project. And then when you're done, there are certain provisions in there about how your project will be treated, but then the idea is you will transition into the new zoning ordinance. So thus the name transitional provisions is transitioning people into what we believe is the new and improved zoning and subdivision laws of this county.
When is this transitional period ending?
That's also a very good question. So it has different time periods associated with it. So one of the transitional provisions was to allow anybody without a prior development approval or not, 3 years until April 1st, 2025, to obtain an approval under the old laws that would enable them to continue to finish their project under the old laws. That period of time is coming to an end. Now, there are a lot of projects out there that already have development approvals, and they have a long period of time in which to finish those projects. For instance, if you have a conceptual site plan, those conceptual site plans were given a 20-year life. And so under that conceptual site plan, you can continue to develop your project, obtain the preliminary plan approvals you need, the detailed site plan and permits you need to finish your project under the old provisions. And that may take up to 20 years. So CSPs, for instance, if you have that, you've got quite a long period of time that you're going to be able to use the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision laws. So those laws are going to be around for a long time.
Thank you, Dave. All right, if we can go back one slide, because what I wanted to kind of also talk about were the definitions that were associated with that. Under 27-2 of the zoning ordinance, that what we did with CB15 was to clarify and revise some of the the definitions that were in there. Also, because we were realizing, especially through the permitting phase, we needed to really clarify what specific uses were, what the definition of different uses are. So it's very clear to everyone as it relates to the zoning ordinance what they're actually doing. So if we want to call one thing, aquaculture, whatever, we're going to actually do that in this process to clarify exactly what you can and cannot do related to that particular use itself and what this means in the zoning ordinance. So that was one of the biggest things when it came to the definitions for the clarification purposes, so everyone can proceed with clarity on that process, on those various processes that are associated with it. Next slide. Also under the administration section, under the zone, within the zoning ordinance. So this is kind of sets the stage on the process that's out there for every application type. It goes into the detailed site plan processes, special exception process, all these different things, the zoning map amendment. It talks about that under the administration section of the zoning ordinance. Also within there, it talks about the clarification and consistency of the revisions being made on the comprehensive planning and sectional map amendment process that's out there. So it clarifies a lot of those long-range planning efforts that take place within our community planning division as well. Also, it talks about the extension of time related to the preparation of the plans going in itself that has to go for legal review as well. Now on the next slide, under the zones, and now we're going to talk about zone regulations. In here, we're looking at the different zones and the zone regulations that are out there. One of the biggest things that's new within the new zoning ordinance is the planned development zone. We're looking at, as you all know, the planned development zone, and within there, it's talking about public benefits. I've had conversations with many of you in the past, and the concern when it comes to clarifying what public benefits are, how to utilize this in the process. So to kind of break this down a little bit more, it's understanding that if you're coming into a development, you, as opposed to going in under the prior zoning ordinance, it would require a comprehensive design zone. So now you're coming into a planned development zone, and you're requesting this under a zoning map amendment process, and you proposing a potential use and density that's going to impact the community. And what exactly is the development going to do to kind of fit into that community a little bit better than just to have the density and everything. So what are they going to do to offset or mitigate some of those impacts that could take place? So some of the things that you could look at as it related to that process are things like providing a public space on the site, different architecture, high quality architecture that's out there, transportation improvements that are not going to be required later on down the road. You can associate that in there as well. But staff, as a part of that process, will have that conversation with the applicant at the time of typically the pre-application conference that takes place, in addition to the SDRC that takes place a little bit later as well. In addition to that, this particular section under CB 15 did revise some of the transit-oriented development zones in there as well. Talking about clarification to build 2 lines along freeways, and also a significant increase in base zone maximum densities in there as well. So let's see. Also, it also talked about some additional location standards when it comes to those zoning map amendments in there. So that was also discussed as a part of the CB 15 portion. Next slide. So under the use regulations that are out there, it really went in under here to talk about, like for example, with qualified data centers. That's one, of course, a hot topic that's all over not only the Prince George's County, but all over the region and the country right now. How can we utilize data centers? So the zoning ordinance helped to clarify how we can utilize data centers and where they can actually be. Here, it's specifically stated under 275101, which is the table for the uses, talks about allowing those qualified data centers in the AG zone. So that now is would be permitted in that particular zone itself. Also, it prohibits assisted living facility uses such as elderly care or handicapped residents, those particular facilities, I should say, in specific other zones also, to kind of discuss that, and also deleted some specific uses and areas as well. Furthermore, it also talked about transit-oriented development and what those permitted uses, expanded that, of course, in those specific areas. You had a question, I'm sorry, go ahead. We have 2 questions, all right.
Is the public benefit requirement solely for ZMA cases? If not, what other zoning process is impacted?
So the public benefit requirement is for those zoning map amendment cases that are out there when it comes to this planned development. So that's one of the requirements of the zoning ordinance, to clarify here. Within the zoning ordinance for specific, if you're doing just a regular zoning map amendment, there are two different processes. So you have a regular zoning map amendment where you're requesting a new zone for a property or a different zone for a property. Under that process, you have to prove what we call, and this is what we've done under the prior zoning ordinance, change or mistake. So that's, and we've talked about in the prior session, I think early on in the brown bag sessions. Change or mistake is one where you're basically, the applicant is saying there's been a significant change in the community, the area, or there was a mistake made during the time that zone was actually applied to that particular property. So that's the regular zoning map amendment process. Now, if an applicant wants to come in and have a planned development, that's a different process where you're offering up those public benefits for a specific use or intensity and density on a property itself. And you're also having to mitigate those potential impacts there and how, so you have to indicate how you're going to mitigate those. And that's a part of the evaluation process that staff will have within that process itself.
We are trying to add trash corrals to TOD property, but are being required to recalculate parking, even though the new zoning does not require parking calculations. We have a case number with DPI, but don't know how to get past M-NCPPC.
Not a problem. So that particular situation, please feel free to reach out to our team. And what we can do is before we log out today, I think at the end of the slide, my contact information is in there. Please feel free to reach out to me on that specific situation. And our team will be happy to get back with you on that, because our intent is not to be a hurdle in the process. Our intent is definitely to work with every developer, every applicant that comes in to ensure they have a good development and a pathway forward. It's not to say no, it's to actually provide a pathway forward for the development community as well, the applicants, property owners, everybody. That's the intent of the planning department, the planning process, is to give you an opportunity and a pathway forward. We're good. Okay. Before we proceed on, I want to also note to say thank you to a lot of the folks that are behind the scenes. So, Ryan, Lisa, as well as Marion. I know a lot of things have been done, so I appreciate all of you for making this happen today as well. Use regulations. Let's kind of dig into that a little bit more. For use regulations, we're talking about additional requirements added in there. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, which I can, but I don't want to spend a lot of time here. But there are different additional requirements that are added in there, such as for monopoles, driving schools, things like that. When it comes to deleted uses, we're able, under this process, to delete specific uses as well, such as, let's say, family child care home use, as well as the model studio. That's going to be a deleted use under requirements for permitted principal uses out there. In addition to that, under the CB15, we edited some uses as well, such as additional requirements for places of worship, solar energy systems, as well as retail sales and service uses that are out there too. And also we clarified the designation of accessory uses that are out there in structures. So we clarified that as a part of this process too. So any other questions when it comes to specific use regulations before I move on to the next section here? On that one. All right. Moving on, under the development standards. The development standards is one that under prior zoning ordinance we did have out there. However, under the new zoning ordinance, we were actually able to go into specific uses and talk about a little bit more and to clarify some things, and also to improve and ensure high quality development and standards that are out there for all types of development within the zoning ordinance. So what it did under this portion of it, it actually kind of provided some technical clarifications out there for development for those particular standards. One of the things that we weren't used to seeing in there were the lighting standards. Under the prior zoning ordinance, we didn't really have those lighting standards that are out there. We had a policy that took place. However, under the new zoning ordinance and the implementation, we actually able to implement specific lighting standards under that particular development standards that are out there as well. And also, a little bit later, we're going to speak on some security exemptions as well, like fences, things like that. That was also developed and added in there too.
Can you speak about places of worship?
So particularly in this one, let me go back here. I can't go into a lot of specifics on that one. I'll just say it just added to the uses. I believe for that one, it may have spoken about the square footages and different requirements when it comes to development standards that are out there associated with that. Kind of, if you have more specific questions on that, I could just contact me directly and I can get you that information on there. But specifically, it's really just kind of helping to provide clarity on those specific standards that are out there. I think we have a question in the back for us.
Is there a document that compares the old zone and the new zone and highlights the changes instead of somebody reading the old, reading the new, and trying to decipher all of the changes?
So there is no document that actually does mix between the two. However, we have a few documents that are out there regarding zoning categories. There's a document out there on our website that talks about those zoning categories, the new ones. And then there's the prior zoning ordinance. It's a little convoluted. It would take a lot of time. It's a very huge document. So to kind of put the two together and kind of marry that up is very difficult to do so. However, if there's something specific you need staff to look at, we'll be happy to take that look with you on that one. So if you have anything particular, we'd love to work with you on that.
How would I do that if I have that question regarding industrial zoning, for example, the before and after?
That's exactly what our planning information services team is there for. So you can reach out to that team. I can get you their phone number before we leave. And actually, if you want to, they're actually right out front. I can take you right over there to them.
Sure.
Kind of work with them on that. They can go to, ask specific questions. They'll bring up the prior zoning, the current zoning that's allowed on the property, and also discuss the differences that are out there. If there's a specific use you want to look at, they can talk about that. Densities that are out there that were before and now what the new density requirements are, development standards, anything you need to know, they can walk through that with you. Not a problem.
Right. You mentioned something about the elderly and handicap and group home. What happened there?
So that's just the different standards and the uses that are permitted in certain zones. They may permit those in certain zones and not permit them in other zones. So that's what those changes are under CB 15. The council took a look at that and made some changes there with the use as far as being permitted and not being permitted in certain areas.
Thank you.
And then there's certain areas that might have required them or allowed them to be permitted as a special exception. So those are another option out there that was under those particular changes that took place. Good. All right, and also the folks who are online, if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat. I want to kind of go through those with you as well. If I don't have the answer today, I'm an honest person. I will tell you I don't have it, but I will get back to you. Okay. All right. Let's see. Moving on to the non-conforming. This is the next slide here.
Sorry to interrupt. Someone did mention online that they found that the swipe tool was useful for between new and old.
So the swipe tool that's on there, to clarify, the swipe tool on there just clarifies the actual zone that's out there. So the prior zone versus the new zone and what it is. So it kind of says the change, what it is and what it was before. So you can actually go onto our website and find the swipe tool app that's on that application that's on there and go to the particular property and you can see what the prior zone was and you swipe it and you'll actually see what the new zone is at that point as well. So that's what that swipe tool is actually meant for out there. But that's a great point. That is definitely a great point. Okay. All right. Now, next slide, we're going to talk about non-conforming. This is the fun stuff. Okay. This is what a lot of the developers really want to know. They don't want to be no one really wants to be a non-conforming use that's out there. However, that option is there as well in order to certify because we do realize under the zoning ordinance that changes do take place. The county council has the authority to make changes on specific uses. So it's being permitted in certain areas and certain properties that are out there. So if that does happen, under the CB 15, it made some clarifications. There's some technical revisions out there as well when it comes to those non-conforming uses, the structures, as well as the uses and the structures and the lot standards as well. So that's pretty much what those different standards and changes did for those non-conforming uses that are out there. Okay. Question, I believe we had.
Other than the swipe tool.
What is it? What was the?
Someone just said other than the swipe tool. She asked
Okay, all right. Still got a question in the back.
As a concerned citizen here, non-conforming uses, can you clarify? I often get the question of auto shops and industrial properties and things that community members are just not fond of. Is there a timeline where they all of a sudden become non-conforming? Can you clarify how that whole non-conforming process comes to be?
That is an excellent question. So for non-conforming uses in the zoning ordinance, so after let's say the council indicates that they don't allow that particular use on a property or within a zone, that use can continue on as long as they do not cease operation for more than 180 days, okay? During that time period, if they, let's say, for example, I'll give an example of this. So if they, as of today, they stop that let's say it's a retail, an auto detail facility, right? And the zoning ordinance gets implemented and does not permit that use on that property anymore. If they stop operation today, and then let's say 3 months down the road, or actually 2 months down the road, another use comes in, another business comes in and wants to do the same use, they're going to be okay, because actually they have to prove, the new owner has to prove that that use has not ceased operation for more than 180 days during that time period. Now, there have been some situations throughout Prince George's County where a lot of folks cannot do that. And how do you actually prove? That's another question that's out there. How do you prove that those uses have not ceased? So some of the things that we look for here in the planning department are electric bills that are out there. We're looking at rent that's out there that's been paid. We're looking at use and occupancy permits that have been issued, building permits that have been issued. We're looking at connections with water and water bills that are out there. So all these different things that are in the background that we request applicants to provide to us, so we can kind of ensure that that use has not ceased operation for any more than 180 days. So that's like the clarifying point here. It cannot cease more than 180 days. When that does happen, then that says that that approval for that use to be at that particular site, it can no longer move forward at that point. Any other questions out there on this one? And this is a hot topic. It's a good one. Yes, sir.
So, as long as it's not 180 days?
Correct. So if you, for example, if you all, again, like today, if they stopped operation and then a month later, that same use wants to go back into that site, as long as they can prove that that particular use itself, it doesn't matter of who did it. It's a matter that the use continued on, has not ceased operation for more than 180 days. They can continue on with that use. However, if that use has ceased 180 or more than 180 days, then they can no longer do it there anymore, because they have to be in compliance or in conformance with the new zoning ordinance requirements that are out there. So that's a really big thing. I think everyone really needs to make sure they understand as well. Then we got another question in the back.
Well, it's related to this question. So if you have your auto detail shop and it's no longer permitted, and then you are selling it to another auto detail shop, is there some kind of pause so that if they're going through a permit process and it takes some time, if it passes that 180 days, do they get kicked out? And then the other piece is, my understanding is this prevents them from kind of expanding the business, because they would have to stop to do redevelopment on the site. And so that's where it comes into effect.
Right. So same situation would still apply. It's just that operation cannot cease. So they can go. So here's to kind of clarify here. So if that auto detail facility, the original one ceased, and then a month later another one wanted to come into that particular location, but they wanted to make some, let's say, some renovations, right? They want to make renovations. The use at that point, they can file for a use and occupancy to continue the operation, and they'll be fine. However, and they can go in and do the work, have the work done after that. But the key here is for them to file for their use and occupancy and be issued that use and occupancy within that time period. They can go in after that and make your renovations. So the key is making sure that your use, your non-conforming use, continues on. So you've got to have proof that that's continuing. So the other thing is, what I really try to encourage a lot of new business owners that are out there that are moving to these locations, work with the prior owner and get those other documents that prove that that use did not cease, or that prove that use did not cease for more than 180 days. You have to have that relationship with them in order to continue everything on. So do not get rid of any files that are out there associated with it. If they give you files, don't get rid of it, right? Whatever you do not get rid of them, because you are more than likely going to need them later on to prove that use can continue on, okay? But to your point, they can continue that use as long as, number one, they should go ahead and file for their use and occupancy first. That is so important. They've got to file for that first, and then go in and get their renovations done right after that, okay? Any other questions that are out there? Good. All right, now we're coming up towards the end with the enforcement side. This is the fun stuff, obviously. The enforcement arm of the zoning ordinance is not in the planning department. I'll say that again. The enforcement arm of the zoning ordinance is not in the planning department. That is in the department. Actually, let me go back. Can anyone in the chat tell me where the enforcement arm is within Prince George's County? I want somebody to tell me that. Anybody, just type it up in the chat.
Tamara says T-Pie.
There you go.
They're
Tamara.
getting it. We got 3,
Who-
4.
Susan.
Susan, Miriam.
I'm
Susan,
loving it.
Tiffany.
That's it. Thank you.
Tamara.
You all get it. I can't tell you how many phone calls we get on enforcement. We don't have one inspector in the planning department. There's not one inspector that's going to, number one. Number two, no one's going to go out there to inspect these particular sites itself to enforce the zoning ordinance. Under the law, county law, under the zoning ordinance, the requirement for enforcement is under DPI. They have enforcement in their name, okay? So it's very clear. So be sure, if you have questions or concerns with a use, a property maintenance issue, all that's all under their arm. So please reach out to them, file your complaints there through 311, whatever you got to do. But that is the avenue to go down. The planning department can't help you on that. We can connect you. We'll be happy to connect you over there, but we can't help you, okay? All right. So that said, we had some updates when it came to CB15 to fees that are out there. Fees in particular, that was a concern when it came to that. We did not have a fee in there for what we call zoning ordinance interpretations. So that was a new element within the zoning ordinance that was out there, made available to the development community whenever they wanted to meet with staff and talk about and to get an email. They wanted us to document a position on a particular item in the zoning ordinance. And there's an avenue that within the planning industry that we have, which is an interpretation. Many other localities around the country do this. I'm talking about the city of Miami, the city of Charlotte, all these other jurisdictions around the country. They have a process in place. What that does, it pretty much puts it in writing for that particular property, what's been permitted and interpreted for those uses, structures, those different elements in the zoning ordinance for that property itself. So it puts that out there. And also what we do in the zoning ordinance, we put a copy of this online so everybody can see it, okay? It's not just applicable to that specific folks and send it to them. We put it on the website so everybody can see it, all right? So that's all out there right now. However, we had to put a dollar amount for the amount of work that goes in. So that's where those fees come in for that particular process. Furthermore, in addition to that, in the planning information services, we were talking about them earlier, they have to do zoning certification letters. There's a lot of research that happens for those as well. So there's a $200 fee that was associated with that because it's a lot of work going on behind the scenes when it comes to those certification letters and getting them out. And it's a lot of folks are requesting them. So there are hundreds among thousands that get requested every year. And so we have to provide responses to the public on that in a timely manner. And they're impacting on such things as financing for different projects and clarifications that are out there required to understand what zoning is permitted on those particular properties. In addition to that, we're also talking about signposting fees and signposting in general. Under the prior ordinance, we had a fee in there for $30. I think it was a prior ordinance, or actually it was our fee schedule. It was a $30 signposting fee that was associated with that. What we've done now is actually put the sign or the production of signs, got it out of the planning department, because we heard from the development community and we wholeheartedly agree that if you wanted to get your sign, you should be able to go to any sign company in the area. If you wanted to go to Kalamazoo, Michigan and get your signs, That's not a problem. We send you the sign template. As long as you get those signs and they meet the specific zoning ordinance requirements and get them posted by a specific time period, we don't care. Okay? We don't care. As long as they get up and you've met the public notice requirement, right? So that said, amongst there, here's another thing that was new. The development community, actually not the development community, the citizens and our council members raised a lot of concern when it came to these signs. And I will say this, and just to be transparent, there was a particular property in Bowie that had a development application and the sign posting was there. The sign was sitting low to the ground. I'm talking about the sign was like 2 inches. The bottom of the sign was 2 inches from the ground. Who's going to see that, right? So what we did as a part of CB 15, the council members, I should say, approved making specific height requirements. So it had to be at least, I think it was 3 feet. The bottom of the sign had to be 3 feet from the ground. So we wanted to ensure that the public actually saw those signs that are out there. Not only that, we made the signs bigger because as you're driving by, you can't see that sometimes. You know, all due respect, some people are going higher than the speed limit. I'm not going to say I'm one of them. But, you know, people go above the speed limit and you're not going to pay attention to these signs. So therefore, if you make the sign a little bit bigger, that's the thought process behind it. People are going to notice it a little bit more and be able to kind of stop, say, okay, let me kind of look at this on here as well. What the planning department has done also is put on our PG Atlas program, you can click on there and see what sign postings that are out there and get more information about those projects. So if you know where that sign is or that location is, you can go to PG Atlas, click on it, and it gives you information about that project, about the planner on there, everyone to contact if you need to do that. So that is made available to you. So that said, last slide is more so the summary. These overall changes, a lot of them are technical changes that are out there. However, there were a lot of clarifying things such as the definitions that are associated out there, planned development zones, transit-oriented development centers that are out there, clarifying the requirements for those as well as enforcement and the fees and the signposting aspects in there. So that said, last slide is just my wonderful, should be contact information on, actually, yes, contact information for the planning department. You can look there. My information is on the website. Please feel free to reach out to me and the rest of the team. We are here and we are made available to you. We are a public agency. Reach out to us. We will respond in a very timely manner. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Do we have any questions? Actually, I'll turn over to the director.
Okay, so thanks again. Let's give a round of applause to James Hunt. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So there's a couple things that I heard during this session today. So I really want to make sure everyone understands these sessions are also opportunities for the planning department to make some changes. And so one thing I do want to share, we are in the process of updating one of our divisions and creating a new division. And so some of the feedback that I heard today is in regards to how do we have more materials for the public to understand. We have residents, we have business owners, nonprofits, schools, we have other cities. We have just everyone that wants to be involved in the process. So our job is to make sure if the old versus the new code is not very clear, then that's something that we probably need to do with our new division. So please stay tuned on seeing how we can make that a little bit easier to navigate. The swipe tool is fun, but what I'm hearing is that we need to be able to articulate a little bit better the differences because we have a 700-page zoning document, 700 pages for the entire county. The other thing I want to share is that we're going to have workshops pretty soon. So we're hoping to get input from residents, developers, business owners, schools, municipalities on our workflow process. We're also looking to get feedback on our subdivision regulations. And so if you remember a couple sessions ago, and so this is all tied up to our code. And so please keep a lookout for that. The other thing that is really important to mention, as Mr. Hunt shared, is that our general plan sets up all the great stuff in our zoning. And so when people ask questions about, well, why is this use here? Or why does this happen? We start a visioning process. And so hopefully in the next fiscal year, we're going to start looking at our visioning of where our uses go, because our zoning puts in the standards for our uses. So a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now, we probably need to do a deeper dive and kind of explore a little bit more across the county. So stay tuned for that. So that's it for me, Mr. Hunt. Back to you.
Great, thank you, thank you. And so I think we had some questions, I believe. Real quick, sorry, I know we have like 6 minutes left.
I remember when, CB 15 was passed and everything. Then I remember it was appealed. What is the status of the appeal? And how is that how are we working around that?
That's an excellent question. So CB15 right now is implemented and in action. So all the different changes that have taken place are being reviewed under that council bill and associated, incorporated in the new zoning ordinance, the current zoning ordinance, I should say. However, I will say that CB15, I understand it has been appealed, and so until we hear anything back from the courts on that, everything is continued on. So we'll have to kind of wait, and our principal counsel's here. If any additional information is on that, they can provide. He can provide there with you, but for that. But at this point in time, that's kind of where we are right now. So all those changes to CB15 are still in play, and we're following those as now.
The new zoning ordinances, by the requirements that they have, supersede some of the older ones, and they're going to make the existing vacant lots not buildable. For example, in R55, which I used to buy a lot of infill lots, rectangular shape, lot 50 feet at the front and all the way straight, and now it's not going to meet the 65 feet frontage requirement. So what happens to those infill lots?
So that goes back to those non-conforming aspect, what that looks like at that point. So there's a whole process in there for those lots as well in that process. So, but that's where they are. They would be considered more so at this point in time non-conforming at that point.
So what does that mean? Are they developable or not? Or what is the non-conforming process for instance like this?
Right, so I'll let our principal counsel kind of go into that detail.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. That was a legislative decision last year to change the treatment of those non-conforming lots. So right now, they're unbuildable. And as of April 1st, 2025, because like I was mentioning before, until April 1st, 2025, you can make use of the old zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. But after that date, unless you have a prior approval, you can't. And so you'll have to comply with the current zoning ordinance to deal with any kind of non-conforming lots. And I think a lot of those are likely going to have difficulty. Maybe you have a specific, application or project you want to ask about, we can look at it in particular. But it will be more strict after April 1st, 2025.
So I'm not hearing specific answers. So what you're saying, you cannot develop it because it doesn't meet the new requirement, and so it's non-conforming. And then what does that mean? Is it a procedure that it can become developable or not?
It would have to be a legislative change.
So the answer is no, I guess, at this moment. So people holding those vacant lands are kind of out of luck.
I don't know, your specific lot that you're talking about, but I do know there will be a number of lots that will no longer be conforming or able to be built under the provisions of the old ordinance after April 1st, 2025. So that may very well be the case, but the change would have to be a legislative change. That's not something Park and Planning could do.
Right.
And just to follow up on the question about CB15, yes, that is in the courts. They had their oral argument, I think, just a couple weeks ago. But it's just in the courts. It doesn't do anything to change the status of CB15, which is effective and continues to be implemented.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little about the impact on downtowns and sort of setbacks where you have, I'm the mayor of Upper Marlboro, so we have downtown, the sidewalk, and your buildings are right up to there. And what I'm hearing from the property owners is that it's difficult to rebuild something, not exactly what's there, right? To like make something more modern and rebuild it in the same
right, in the same
envelope.
footprint,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And it can be difficult because throughout the rezoning process, decisions are made about how a particular zone should develop. And so, for instance, we had zones where the change was encouraging more build to the street line, right? And so if you're in a zone that changed, you may very well have new regulations because that was the intent of the new zoning ordinance, a new vision for the county. And so there may be situations such as you're talking about that are creating some difficulties for property owners. But there are a lot of rules that assist with non-conforming buildings so that they aren't just something you have to tear down. But you may have situations like you talk about that may be a little bit more difficult because the vision for that zone has changed.
I would kind of add in there because I do realize it was a few years ago there was if you recall that site that's in Upper Marlboro that I think there was an unfortunate fire that took place there, and that was a concern for that property itself. And so there was a process when it comes to that non-conforming that they had to prove as well. So that was kind of where that comes in, all fed right in there together. But for these particular process or issues, we will be happy to kind of take a look at those and kind of provide support and efforts in as much as possible that we can in that area. That's an intent and the plan of the planning department to be able to do that and support everyone. Yeah. So what he was saying is that there are a lot of flexibility that's out there associated with it as well.
Right.
So
You've got the 180 days, but there are situations where you get more time than that. Let's say your entire building was, saturated by water and it's going to take you more than 6 months to fix and you can't operate your business. Well, there's exceptions for that. But the idea behind non-conforming uses, of course, is we don't want this use anymore. It's not appropriate here anymore. You balance that against the fact that someone's been operating that use there for a long time. So you can't make them just stop use right away, right? So you want to try to encourage the use that we think is right for that, the county thinks is right, while at the same time allowing people who've been practicing that use or conducting that use for a long period of time to be able to continue to do so. So you get this balance between the two. And that's where we come up with these, conflicts and these 180-day rules and the right to still repair a building or conduct a use that, maybe there was a permit issue that delayed things. So that's the balance. That's what you're fighting with non-conforming uses.
all right, and we have one last question.
Will there be more data centers built in the county?
Well, I can't answer that particularly. However, there is an avenue within the zoning ordinance that says that when they're permitted, it's not left up to us to make that decision to take place. From our job, we provide an avenue for that. So it's left up to the developer to meet specific requirements that are out there associated with those data centers. So that's one of the things that they're going to have to look forward to kind of handle. We can kind of coordinate on that, what that looks like. But until from our end, we don't know for sure to answer your question, specifically. There are sites that have been approved already for data centers. Whether or not they proceed and down the process, completing the process, that's truly left up to the applicant at that point and making all the other, because it's not just the county as a stakeholder in that process, it's the state as well. And, the energy companies, all that associated with it. So there's a lot of factors that are in play at that point in time. But, from our standpoint, we are to provide an avenue for them, which we have, and we'll continue to work with everybody as we already talked about today.
And they're considering that's a task force.
Yeah, and they are considering a resolution already. 2 council resolutions were initiated, and so that's kind of where the council are on this topic. So to study this particular use and how we can the county can look to coordinate and streamline a process for those data centers, and actually to do a study as well, I believe. All right, that said, I appreciate, again, everyone's coming out here today. Also, obviously, the folks online. This is a very huge topic. We want to ensure that every one of these brown bag sessions are informative and meet your needs. So that said, I've asked Ms. Kelly here to put my information into the chat for you to provide any feedback on that. In addition, if you have any further questions out there, we want these sessions to be as fruitful as possible. It's not intent for the planning department to kind of water everything down. Our intent is to provide you information and guidance on these different topics that are out there to give you an avenue forward, because we know there are some concerns and questions that are out there. So please feel free to reach out to me and the rest of the team if you have any further questions. And again, thank you all, and please enjoy the rest of the day, this nice, beautiful, warm, sunny weather. Thank you.